Hello and welcome to the Women's Rugby League podcast. Today I'm joined by
Nessa Hadley, Great Britain's Teachers, Witness Vikings, sponsored by Angela Dale of the Great Bar Pub. I play forwards, either prop or second row.
How did you first get involved with rugby?
So, I was always really sporty. And just before my 18th birthday, I moved in with my grandparents because my relationship was breaking down at home. And my nan is a massive rugby league fan, so she's Wolves Wire fan through and through. I think her blood runs blue. She's been to the Challenge Cup finals, all that sort of thing. Whereas at the time, I was massively into football, so I was a big Liverpool fan, for those that don't know, but I don't like football anymore. And then I went off to uni. So I went to Nottingham-Trent University and I lived on a rural campus. No, I lived in the city centre but went to a rural campus, so I found it quite difficult to make friends to begin with. So I thought, what better way to try and make friends? I'm already sporty, is to get involved with a sports club. So I had to look around and I thought, basketball seems fun. Turned up for the trials, it's just a taster session. Realised that I was absolutely awful at basketball. As somebody who's 5'4", there was no point in even trying to be good at it when all these girls around me were just awesome. I was awful. So I thought, right, okay, Nan loves rugby. I didn't even know there was two codes of rugby at the time. Having grown up in Cheshire, rugby league was more of the known code rather than union. So I thought I'd go down to the rugby trials, and I turned up with it just being a sport which struggles for numbers anyway. It was sort of, oh yeah, we'll take you even if we've never seen you. So straight away, met a load of friends, met some friends for life, joined, they chucked me on the wing, literally had no idea what I was doing, just dead keen. And then gradually progressed through there, really. So by my second year, I was elected on the committee as a development officer. So I sort of like had a role of trying to incorporate more girls in, which was great because I had these different links for the different campuses. And then in my final year, I was elected as the president for the rugby club. So I had a lot more responsibility there, and then sort of tried to stamp out sort of lad culture, tried to be more inclusive, sort of like pave the way for that, I suppose. And at that point, I was playing for I was playing for my university team, but I was also signed for West Bridgford, which I think they definitely were at the time, but they were a championship team. So they were like sort of my local team down there. So I was playing union for them. And I sort of like fluctuated all around the pitch really. So I started off on the wing, and then gradually moved forward. So I ended up at hooker. Probably because I was short and I was a bit chunkier then, so I sort of fell into that natural position as very tenacious. And then as I got a bit fitter, I moved back towards the back of the pack, so I started playing open side, and just loved to run with ball in hand, really. So that was, by the time that finished, that was 2017. And then I came back home, so I moved back up north to Cheshire. And I joined my local So when I moved back home, I joined my local club, which is called Winnington Park. It's got quite a lot of history in the club, actually. I think they played in the league with Wasps or something way back when. And it was my first sort of real season as a senior player, so it's all right going to uni and playing in a Bucks league and having a laugh and then having a pint and stuff afterwards. But then going and like stepping up into the women's game, it felt like a massive step for me. Within my first season, I ended up being awarded Player of the Season, which came as an absolute shock, and gave me an awful lot of confidence. And whilst I was there, because I still play occasionally at the time, I met Dawn Taylor, or Dawn Hartrig, who plays for Saints. So I got talking to her. I was sort of like seeing a guy at the time, and he was massively into rugby league. Played for Hemel, but moved back up north. And sort of like 2 and 2 sort of like clicked. He'd seen me play Union for a bit. He was like, "You should try league." Having known Dawn, she was like, "Yeah, just come down to Saints, see what they'll have." And that's how I really got my foot in the door of rugby league, really. And I haven't looked back since.
Tell me a bit about your time at Saints and how did that go for you?
I think I joined Saints, or started training at Saints. I think it was in the April of 2019. Might have been the May. I'm not really sure. And I loved it. It was a complete wake-up call, a sort of starstruck moment, really. So I'd obviously come in way after the pre-season. A couple of games had already been played. And I didn't really have any expectations. I just wanted to go, learn something new, meet some new people. Had no idea of the players that were around me or the sort of profiles that they had. I had no idea who they were. I just looked at them and thought, "Blimey hell, you're good." And sort of, aspired to have been able to fit in with that sort of ethos. The facilities that were there were right up my street. So I am a lecturer in sports performance. So seeing the setup that they had and the investment that they had for S&C, especially in the women's game, I was completely in awe in. And for me at that time, it was, doesn't matter what happens or what your aspirations are, whether you get played, whether you're not, you're here and you can learn and you can grow and you can adapt. So I just tried to take everything in my stride from that, really. And Deck was the head coach at the time. I think he is still the head coach. And every week he'd put the player list out. And I never once expected my name to be on a sheet or anything. And then the under-19s were just setting up, I think. And they had their opening game. I think it was against Leeds Rhinos under-19s team. So I was invited for game time. They said, "Come for game time." And I'd learned a couple of drills and a couple of moves, like a drop off and stuff like that, but I'd never really put it into action. And I just remember like getting to the under-19 training, and we were doing a run through, and I was panicking. And John from GB will probably tell you this as well. I had no idea where I was supposed to start. Where do you stand when you start a game? I had no idea, and I was fixated on it. Just couldn't get my head past it. So thankfully one of the coaches showed me, and then we just sort of went from there, went for a run through, and then before I knew it, we went and travelled to Leeds, put a shirt on. My grandparents for the first time, both of them came and watched me play, so that was a massive, lovely moment for me. Had some of my best friends there, and in my opinion, absolutely tore it up. I played prop for 80 minutes, and I looked like I'd played prop for 80 minutes. I had 2 massive black eyes, my nose was really fat, but I loved it, and I wouldn't have changed anything. We were getting absolutely done over, but I think sometimes when you're in games like that, I think, it brings the character, like character is judged like by the person who's got the back up against the wall, and in that game, we absolutely had our back up against the wall, and I think, like, for me, having literally known nothing about the game, as a senior player, or certainly an older player, to these much younger players, it was, whatever you do, you just don't quit. Yeah, best moment, that for me. A couple of weeks later, we ended up playing York City Knights, and that was when I got my Super League debut. Again, played prop. But I love it. I absolutely love it. So my time, although it was short at Saints, was one which was filled with opportunity and filled with development, and to have received a heritage number and to have spent that time sort of, I didn't even think about it at the time, but now I was mentored by half of an England squad.
Yeah, that's it. You go in that team and you go like, you went in and probably the best thing, you're like, I don't know who they are, I'm just, if you go in and going, "Oh, I'm England captain there, and she's off the television and she's fantastic," you're just like, no, I'm here, learn me bit, do what I can. Yeah,
just run hard and just try and be quick. And, I absolutely had no idea who Emily Rudge was, or Jodie Cunningham, or Shani, or TJ, and just the warmth that they gave and the acceptance that they gave was unreal. I feel so lucky to have been given that opportunity in hindsight now.
What was next for you after St Helens then?
So I think it was August 2019. I was still at Saints, and I saw an advertisement for the Great Britain Teachers Trials on Facebook, and I thought to myself, I'll just go give it a try. You never know unless you try. So I went and I applied, and I thought, oh, there'll be loads of, because in Saints there was obviously like quite a few teachers, and there's quite a few ex-teachers players. Of course, they were wrapped up with the England Performance Unit, so I don't know, I think in my head I thought they would have been there, but they weren't. So I ended up going to trials. I turned up, and I was surrounded by girls from every other rugby league club, north to south, east to west, and I was the only Saints player. Sarah Lovejoy was supposed to have come along, but I think it was the Challenge Cup final and Saints were in it, so Sarah Lovejoy actually had tickets to go and see that, so she wasn't coming to the trials. And I walked through the door. John Wally was sat there with a couple of the other members of staff, and he went, "Who are you?" At that point I introduced myself. He said, "Oh, well, what position do you play?" And I went, "Prop." And I think from that moment, I think he looked at me and he thought, well, number one, you don't look like a prop, which is what everybody says. A lot of people have told me that. And number two, well, if you are a prop, I used to be a prop, so I'm going to come and watch what you've got to give. And it was a brilliant day. I'd never really trialled for anything big before. I'd done a couple of Cheshire trials for rugby union, but nothing for rugby league. Like, I never went to trials for Saints. I just turned up and started training. And the first one was all about communication. The second one was an obstacle course around St Jude's. I don't know if you've seen it. It's dead cool. And we were paired. So I was paired with Paige Costello. Now,
what a lovely person.
A couple of times. So she's an absolute machine, isn't she, fitness-wise? Which was great for me because I like to consider myself quite competitive. And we were going in like a race, and it was the fastest team to complete this obstacle course. And I think we've completed it in like less than 90 seconds or something. And then it just went from there, really. So I got a phone call. I think it was on the Sunday. Trial was on the Saturday. Got a phone call from John on the Sunday, and he goes, "Well, how did you think it went?" And in my head, like I'd had quite a few knockbacks in the past, and I was very hypercritical of myself. And he was so reassuring. He was like, "Well, I don't really know what you're going on about, because I thought you were brilliant. I thought you were completely, like, I didn't know what to expect, and you blew my expectations away." And then they did a lovely write-up on the website where they're like, "She came with loads of enthusiasm and loads of energy." And I thought, do you know what? It probably sounds about accurate. So, yeah, it was really good. So that's how I ended up getting my foot in the door with GB. And that was great.
How was it playing for GB teachers then?
It was overwhelming. So I hadn't really played that much rugby league. So in the first game against the Armed Forces, you know, they are absolute powerhouses. You can't tell what position they play because they're all absolute units. They're so incredibly fit. And it's like running against a brick wall, and they come at you just as hard as you go at them. So in my first game, I went on at prop, so I didn't start. I was on the bench, came on it after about 20 minutes, stayed on for about 20 minutes. And I think Amy was playing hooker at the time, and we were right on the try line. We were about 10 metres out, and the ball had the option of going left or right. I think if it went either way, we were in. We did score from that, and I just remember, like, if the ball would have gone the opposite way, it was coming to me, and I just keep thinking now, like, maybe that was my moment, and maybe that was the first rugby league try that I was going to get for GB. I just thought, nah, can't be. Thank God, it didn't, because imagine if it just came at me and absolutely flopped. And then I remember a little bit later on in the game, it was quite neck and neck for a long time. And I think the final score was 22-24, I think, or something like that. It was really close. And I remember just putting an absolute shot on somebody, and the video was on YouTube. And I remember Sarah Lovejoy, and you can hear her on the video, talking over the top of it. And they went, "Oh, who was that? Who's just put a shot on?" And they're like, "Was that Nessa? Was that Nessa?" And it was me. I ended up getting right underneath somebody, and held a couple of people out for a while. And then the second game, we ended up travelling down to Neath, right at the bottom end of South Wales, and it was in a terrible storm, so it was going to be a long drive anyway, but the storm made it twice as long, or it certainly felt like it was going to be twice as long. And again, I was supposed to have started on the bench at Prague, but one of the girls was running late. I can't remember who it was. One of the second rows was running late, so John came up to me and was like, "Nessa, you're gonna be starting. You're starting second row." And again, just had a complete flap. Where do I stand? Of all the other things I could think of at that moment was, where do you stand when it's kick-off? How long's kick-off? Maybe 3 seconds?
Yeah.
I was absolutely fixated on it. But that was really super cool, because that was like the inaugural game for Wales, opening up in any sort of rugby league competition that they'd ever done. And, coming from a rugby union background, we'd sort of expected that they'd probably play on their strengths and look for a lot of offloads, which is exactly what they did. But they were super keen to begin with, and they came at us full throttle. And I think as the game sort of opened up towards the second half, I think that's where us as a team sort of outclassed them a little bit. I don't think they were expecting it, so we sort of, once we got our nose in front, we sort of ran away with it.
Moving on to Widnes. How did that move come about?
I think it was in January 2020, before coronavirus kicked off. I decided to make the decision, or I made the decision to look at what the best steps for me would have been. So, having only played 4 rugby league matches at that point and had made it into an international setup, with very little game time under my belt, I thought I need to go somewhere where I'm going to ultimately get a lot more game time, just so that I can learn what it is that I'm supposed to do on a pitch, and make those mistakes that everyone's supposed to make, but being able to be comfortable doing that. So I made the decision to move to Widnes Vikings. So I was already good friends with Amy Cleaver, or Amy Wood, depends on which one she wants to go by, who is the Widnes captain, but also a teammate who plays alongside me in GB. So I contacted her. She was like, "Yeah, mate, just come down." So I did. And I felt like straight away there was a couple of girls there that had previously played with in the under-19s game. They sort of knew about me because they'd seen me playing that game, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you'll be really good here." And ultimately, it was just a move to be able to put me in a position where I could just get a little bit more confident, make those mistakes, get more pitch time, and then look to progress and look to develop further, however that might look like. So whether that's into more of a leadership role within Widnes, or whether that's, ultimately to go back up into a Super League team, that was sort of my thought process there. Whilst I was signed, or still unsigned, in that first bit, or the first block of signing, I was approached by Wigan, and ultimately was offered a month's trial for Wigan. Went down there a couple of times to try it out, loved it, but then coronavirus struck and everything was put on hold. So that's sort of where we are now, in terms of everything. So, yeah.
So, that's your career up to date. So before we go, the 3 questions of doom. Question number 1. What 2 pieces of advice would you give yourself at 16? Any piece of advice?
I think to me, it's quite obvious. So, number one is just be brave enough to try, because it doesn't really matter what happens, whether it's good, whether it's bad. You either win or you learn. You're never going to lose. So put your big pants on, pull them up really high, and get yourself out there and just try it. Because looking at what I've accomplished since I went to university and to where I am now, it's been revolutionary. So that is exactly what to do. I wish I would have just done stuff a lot earlier and a lot sooner, because who would have known where I'd be at right now. And then number two, God, it's so cliche. Look after yourself. Before you even consider anybody else, before you even think about anybody else, however selfish and self-centered that might sound, you're no use to anybody unless you're of use to yourself. So it doesn't matter what team you're in, what you want to go and do. If you're not in the right place or not in the right state, you're not going to go be able to do that. So be brave and look after yourself.
Question number 2. The 5 players you most enjoy playing with.
Right, I'm going to have to count them on my hand, because I'll never remember how many I've said otherwise. Number 1 sort of takes me right back to when I started uni. She was a player that really, really inspired me. She was just all round good. So that is somebody called Maddie Lockwood. Big shout out. I'll get to tag her in so she watches this. Second, I think, again, comes from uni, but it's from the coaching side of it. So it's one of the old coaches called Matt Thomas. So I think he still coaches at West Bridgford now. He taught me an awful lot, and I think he's just about to have his first baby and stuff. So congratulations to that, Matt. Hope it all goes well. Thanks for everything that you've done. Hope business is going all right. Third, Dawny. So she's both a Willington Park player and St Helens player. I look at her as a bit of a mentor. She knows I'm coming on here. She can't wait to watch it or listen to it. Inspires me every day by her conduct and what she does with her life and how she treats those around her, and just the awesome player that she is. Fourth, I think it's got to be Darcy Stott. So Darcy is was one of the Saints players when I was there. Really young, energetic, hard-hitting beast. I think she's going to do really, really well. And she was always just fun to be around. And then finally, I think it's got to be somebody that I look up to. And I hate being really cliche and stuff like that. I really hate it. But again, it's going to be another Saints player, and she probably won't expect it. Because a lot of people will think that I'm going to pick the obvious person, which I'm not. And this person, she turned up to training, and she was just an absolute powerhouse. She just got into the England performance unit, and that's Paige Travis. She's a class player.
So, there's your 5. Third and final question. The 3 players you're least looking forward to playing against.
So I'm going to try and take a different spin on it and use examples of players that I've played with, because I think sometimes players that you play with run at you so much harder. So number 1 is one of a close friend of mine that I used to play Union with back in uni. So that's Beth Statham. She used to play for Harlequins as well, Union team down south. Absolute unit, would just run at you as hard as she can just for fun. Second is one of the young girls who's just moved on from Widnes. So that's Abby Latchford. She's an absolute machine, and just loves to wrap people up and hit as hard as she can, again, just for the fun of it. And then I think number 3 bit of a toss between. I'm going to be cheeky and say 4 because I can't pick between these two. So it's joint third, and that's Shani Crowell and Lizzie Gladman, because they're absolute machines. And when I've ran at them before in the past, it's hard to get back up after them.
Good choices, good choices. Well, there we are, listeners. The end of the show. Nessa, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to before you go?
Whole army. So I think first and foremost, I've probably got to thank steed planters. So my grandparents, particularly my nan, and then Joshua Halstead, because he definitely gave me that sort of persuaded nudge to actually give it a go, and it's working out all right. And then just all my coaches over the years, so everyone from Sam Bignall, Matt Thomas, I can't remember the names, current coach, what's he called? Have no idea. Everybody from Winnington Park through to Saints and over to Widnes, as well as obviously the GB coaches and all the backroom staff as well. I think it's really important to actually notice and make reference to your physios, your S&C coaches, all those people that sort of, go unheard. Everybody really, that just gives me the motivation and the inspiration to actually pull a jersey on and actually just to go out onto a pitch and try and dance. And that also includes my brothers and sisters, so Angel, Hope, Jamie and Charlotte. Thank you for everything that you've done and the belief that you give.
So, thank you and good night.